But if I can keep them calm and the cat not crazy, I think I really all. So with you, all my show really does is I just try to dive into the business side and kind of the behind the scenes on the back end
Sure.
of making comics and independent comics and films. And so like with you,
Great.
you're kind of a perfect example of someone that has gone through virtually everything that any aspiring comic creator would want to do. You have super successful creator owned comics through the direct market. You've written for Dungeons and Dragons. You did a book with Zoe Thorogood, and you adapted Joe Hill's thing. So all I want is you. You got like 30 minutes. Just start me from zero. Like from how did you go from nothing to now you're
Sure.
this, and then at the very end, I'll just want to know like why did you choose Zoop over kickstarting your current book that's live, and we'll end on that note. And I want
Okay.
to say
And
before all that you're one of the first like people that I met in person at New York Comic Con last year that I was like, oh man, I'm really living the life now. If David, is it pronounced Booher or Boer?
Booher, yeah.
Okay, I
Booher.
was like, oh, he knows who I am, so maybe I am somebody in this space.
Um, I will let you know too that I have three greyhounds that are currently laying just off camera, and between 4 and 5 o'clock they revolt. So as long as we're as long as I sit here with no sudden movements, we'll be just fine.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Let's
I
just
feel your
pencil it.
pain about this like witching hour where they just will lose their minds. Lose their minds.
Great background, by the way. Great bookshelf.
It's virtual. No, I'm
Really?
just kidding. No,
Oh,
it's real.
I believed you. I was like, that's one of the most realistic ones. Even got the glare.
They glare from my lamp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I will let you just start from zero, and then I'll let you just talk. Like, basically, I'm just trying to know, like, what, like, let's just say, like, what was the first book you did, and then like next
Sure.
step was like, what was like kind of
Sure.
the book that broke out? I know Canto's just still selling like hotcakes. You got it's another whatever you're at that's about to come out with Dark Horse. And like how did you get an agent if you even work with one? And like did who
Sure.
reached out to you? Did you submit to publishers? Like what's kind of the behind the
All right.
scenes of
Well,
how you got
we,
there?
I, yeah, I can definitely walk you through all of that. It might be helpful for, I'll probably forget a bunch of stuff. So,
No
jump in with
worries.
questions.
Okay, I'll jump in if I have like more specific stuff to ask about any
Of
of this.
course. Of course. Oh, you just want me to start.
Yeah, just go. Yeah, and then I'll intervene as you if you were
Do you want to introduce me or how do
yeah,
you do this?
I will just say that you're David Burr, comic creator, and then you fill us in from there.
All right. All right. Here we go. Yeah. So, in the beginning of, all of creation. No, so if you want to go in the Wayback Machine, I grew up in Ohio, in a small town there, and I grew up on all kinds of fun stuff like R.L. Stein and horror 80s horror movies and oh my God, why am I blanking? Stephen King and just all this fun stuff that I had as a kid. And I think that's what started me sort of forming who I eventually became as a creator. But I kind of had a circuitous route because as a kid, I always used to tell a story. So, as a kid, I used to say I never read comics. I used to say I came late to comics because I started reading like single issue floppies and collections when I was in my 30s. But then I realized that was wrong for two reasons. The first reason was it suggests that there's a right time to come to comics, and there isn't. Like you can come to comics whenever you want, at any point, pick up anything and just start. I don't care if you're 80 or if you're eight. Um, and then the flip side of it is it wasn't accurate for my own experience because I read comics as a kid. I read Far Side. I read the Sunday Funnies. I read Mad Magazine. Those are all comics, and it's just not the single issue floppies that are in your comic shop on every Wednesday.
I totally
So
forgot about the Far Side. You just like brought back ancient memories.
I mean, it's a
Yeah, that was so
comic,
great. Yeah.
and I sort of like it was a revelation for me to think that, comics is such a big umbrella that, Watchmen and Calvin and Hobbes, they share the same DNA. They've gone down different paths, but they share the same DNA. These are all comics. So I ended up coming into comics as, a reader in my 30s. And by that point, I had become a practicing attorney. And I practiced law for 17 years before I became a full-time writer.
Whoa.
So that was a fun experience, but actually it was really helpful because it really helped me sort of sharpen my craft as a writer, learned how to to be meticulous and also to use as few words as possible. Because you can get flowery and you can get, creative.
I was gonna say, I was like, I didn't think lawyers made the best writers, but
That's
you are the
all I did.
exception.
That's all I did for at least 10 years, I think close to 15 years was I would research and write legal opinions because I worked in the court system and I worked for judges. So literally every day, all day, I would be researching and writing. So after that much time, it just gets ingrained. And in the process of all of this, I started sort of writing creatively, and I've been writing creatively in my spare time for probably close to 15 years now. So just about the
Okay.
same amount of time that I've been practicing law, I've been doing this.
So I'll say number
Um,
one, you have paid your dues. You definitely did 10,000 plus hours of writing just as a lawyer, and then another 15 years of writing as a creative writer. So you
yeah,
didn't get here doing nothing. It wasn't a fluke.
it was a grind, man. It was like, working during the day, 8 hours, and then at night I'd come home and I'd write, and on the weekends I'd write and just, start cranking out stuff. And I wrote three novels, and all of them were just not good at all. But that was my first try, right? So each one, all you can do is do it and see what happens. And then each one was a little bit less terrible than the previous one. So I was improving. So I spent a long time doing that. I was like, okay, well, fine. There was one book that I really loved that I wrote. So I'm like, I'm not getting any traction as a book. So let me write it as this movie script, screenplay. And of course, I'm so naive at this point. I'm like, I'm going to write this. It's going to be fantastic. And it was like this $200 million blockbuster, crazy sci-fi thing. And, but I was so naive. So I was like, yeah, they're totally going to bite on this. I'm nobody.
Hey,
Script's
that's
not
how we all
great.
start. We start writing a 200-page epic that'll never get made.
Yeah. But and also there's such a beauty in that because you have no experience, which means you don't feel, I didn't feel, it's like, I'm going to do this. I didn't feel intimidated or inhibited to do this because I just had no experience. So I had this great naive courage to just go and do it because I didn't know any better. So I did it, and I went through a screenwriting program at UCLA because I live in Los Angeles, and wrote some more scripts, got some more training, and started feeling like maybe I was starting to get some more. Um, I was starting to pick up the skills that I needed, just like being a lawyer. So I went to law school, and I was just a dum dum when I got out of law school. I had all the schooling, but I didn't know what to do as a baby lawyer. And then a couple of years go by, and you're like, oh no, I actually get it. I know what to do. And so that's the same thing with writing. I started doing this, and a few years go by, and I'm like, wow, I'm not a baby writer anymore. I actually think I understand. And I was still not great, but I was getting better. And so that same script that was $200 million, I was like, nothing's going to happen. Maybe a writing sample, but uh, you know, I needed something else. So at the same time, I actually started going to San Diego Comic-Con, and I was going a lot for the TV and movie stuff. And I looked around. I'm like, what is this comics you speak of?
What is this whole world here that
This
I
whole brand new world. And it was about 2009, 2010 when I picked up the first comic that I really connected with on a very visceral level, and that was Lock and Key
Oh,
by Joe Hill.
whoa. You're living the dream then. Because you
Yeah.
wrote with Joe
So
Hill.
so yeah, so my sort of origin story was that got me hooked into comics because it's capes and tights. When you're an outsider looking in, comics is capes and tights, big two, DC, Marvels, Spider-Man, Batman, Superman. That's what it is if you're looking on the outside. And when
Yeah.
you get into the community, you realize there's so much more out there. So Lock and Key showed me what is possible in the comics medium, what kind of stories you can tell and how you can tell them. And so that sort of blew my mind. So from there, I started circling back. And so I got this wonderful joy. I live by this philosophy of never trashing anybody for not having experienced something that you love, because it means they get to experience it for the first time. So
I like that.
so if anybody hasn't seen like the Goonies, I love the Goonies. If you haven't seen them, like I'm so jealous because you get to see it for the first time. So I got to circle back and I got to read things like Fun Home and Watchmen and Persepolis and Mouse and all these cool. I read a couple of Batman stories that are sort of in the canon and classic, and just got to start that education of what has come
Yeah.
before. And at the same time, like I have this movie script as we all do, and I was like, maybe it could be a comic because it's kind of superhero-y, superpowers. And so I put it into a pitch, which again, I didn't know what the hell a pitch document looked like for a comic. So I'm like, something like this. And I was talking to a company, several years of Comic Cons, just going, buying their stuff, just talking to them and their publisher. And then I sent this email follow up after a show, and I was like, hey, I'm working on this story. What do you think? And I sent over like 2 sentences, and it was, I'll never forget it. It's the first time anybody said yes to anything. And they said, this is a great idea. Let's talk more about it. And then there's, and then it was like
Wow.
2 months go by. And you're like, do I email them back? Do
Yeah.
I ping? It's like dating. But
I
you
know
remember
that
that
anxiety.
yeah, you know it. So, yeah, it was my first yes. We developed it as a comic. I learned a lot about scripting, which I had never done before for comics, writing a comic script. Learned a lot about, I mean, some basic stuff like what's uh, how you can do a double page spread. It always has to start with that even page, odd page. And I was writing double page spreads that were odd page, even page, and it doesn't work because of the way comics work, right?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's just
I didn't even think that. I think I've always just worked so well with the artist that they would remind me of that before I like sent it in. But yeah, I forgot about that. You have to line
well, I'm
them up.
working with the editor and I'm like, oh, this would be a cool double page spread. And they're like, yeah, this is great, except we have to shift all the pages so that it actually would look like a double page spread. And that's stuff that stuck with me, like that, just basic trading. So that's when I got my first book published, which was in 20, this got set up in 2015. And my first book was published in 2017. And
Okay.
it just, you're like,
What book
I'm
was
going
that?
to It's called Powerless. It's from what was the very beginning of Vault Comics.
Oh, okay.
So they published like 4 series out of the gate when they were originally another publisher, and then they sort of reinvented themselves to go into the direct market, and it was that's when they became Vault, and there was like 4 or 6 series they launched right away, and mine was one of them.
That's awesome.
And yeah, and you're like, this is it. I am going to be wildly successful. Let's go. And you faceplant. I'm super proud of the story. I'm super proud of the book, of what we did. But I mean, they weren't in a place to put out a blockbuster book. I wasn't in a place to put together and to know what a really successful book might look like. So I got a lot of training from that. And then I did a second book after that with Vault that was a little more successful. It was tied in with Mark Wahlberg and his company wanting to do sort of a comic book, sort of Men in Black-esque sort of comic. And Vault asked me if I wanted to do that. So it was kind of my first license thing. And I said,
Nice.
sure. Uh, and so that was fun. But in the meantime, I got to know Drew Zucker, who is the co-creator and the artist on Kanto.
Mm-hmm.
And he sent me over a concept drawing. I was like, I just want to work with you. I think you're good. What are we going to do? and he sent over a concept drawing that he had in his. I just found out he had it in his desk drawer since 2012 of this little knight, this little kind of clockworky looking knight. And he sent it over to me, and it's within seconds of it being of me looking at it, like a nanosecond. It's like, I don't know who this is, I don't know what the story is. We are definitely telling it. It was just so. It just struck me at how cool this character was, but also how much I could see people connecting with
Whoa,
this
so that
character.
that whole story you developed just based upon his drawing, one character design?
So he had a paragraph of how sort of an idea of a story, and it was pretty dark, kind of revolving around Dante's Inferno. And I came in. I'm a big Wizard of Oz fan, so I'm like, well, this is very Oz-esque to me. So let's use some Wizard of Oz public domain. So let's use some inspiration from Oz. Let's use some information from our inspiration from Divine Comedy, and put together the story. That's kind of our original story, and that's how the first and we sort of build it out from there. And I'm very pleased to say we are now 23 issues into Kanto, and
Yeah, well
we
done,
have
sir.
an end. We have an end. We have an end goal. We have an end in sight for this, and it has never changed since that first time that we put it all together in 2018, 2019. Yeah. So Drew sent me that, put together a pitch. I knew how to do a pitch. I didn't want to ever send a pitch to submissions at whatever publisher, email address. I always wanted to have a name. I wanted to have a name of an editor that knew me and I knew them, and I could send this directly to them and say, can you consider this? And
Smart.
I spent 10 years of networking at cons and shows to be able to know editors. And so we started sort of sending it out, and IDW was interested. We put together this beautiful pitch that looked like parchment pages. And we put in art, sprinkled in art, and we're like, not only is this what the story is going to be, but this is what it's going to feel like. This is what we're doing. And they came back and they said they wanted to do it, so we signed a deal with them. And Kanto came out in 2019.
Nice. What I thought, so what's happening? Where's it at now? I thought it was did you switch? Did the
Yeah,
rights switch?
yeah. So
Okay.
we had a deal with IDW that was a license deal, and it was coming to the end of its life at the end of 2022. So we went to IDW. They'd done 23 issues, 4 volumes. Sort of we all sort of mutually felt like IDW did what it could with it. And so we ended up getting the rights back, and we approached. I was doing Killer Queens with Dark Horse, and really building a relationship with them and my editors. So we brought it over to them and asked if they were interested, and they said they jumped all over it. I loved it. So things we haven't had from Kanto are hardcover editions. So IDW is doing, or I'm sorry, Dark Horse is now going to publish everything that's up to this point in a hardcover. So we're
Nice.
going to be able to go to schools. We're going to be able to go to libraries, bookstores, really pushing into that book market, that kid market with it. And then they also agreed to a bunch of new issues. We're going to complete this we call it the Shrouded Man saga based on the bad guy. So there's going to be 5 volumes of that, and then beyond. So that's news that just came out last week.
Wow.
So
So what
yeah, so the
happened
Kanto,
after Kanto? So that, let's just say
the
after
panic.
book one, and then, but you've had a bunch of other stuff since then, but I feel like that was like your big break.
I think that's true. I think that was true. That's probably, looking back, that's probably the moment when I when folks in the comics community sort of started to like recognize me as a creator, readers. But you have that, and even a breakout success doesn't mean actual long-term success,
Yeah, yeah.
because it took me a long time to set up my next book, which was Killer Queens with Dark Horse. And in the meantime, I think they came out in 21. And 22, I was able to get Firefly, because I was super passionate about that. I got the opportunity because an editor that I knew at IDW had moved over to Boom, and I reached out to her. I'm like, "Hey, what are you doing? What licenses? I'd love to do a license." And she said Firefly, and I said, well, "I freaking love Firefly. You can see I have it right here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, I love Firefly." So I was like, "Yeah." So they said, "Well, we have this one shot." I said, "Okay, great. I'll take it. I'll take what I can get. I'll take it."
Yeah.
And I did this one shot, and because I was so passionate about this characters and this show and the stories, I just really felt connected to this one shot. And I sent in a script to them the feedback I got on it was that they all just really loved what I did. So that, it's just one step at a time. I was able to get that one shot because Kanto came out at IDW and an editor there had moved over, and she asked if I wanted to do it. Did a good job on that script. And they're like, well, the writer on the Firefly ongoing series is leaving after this issue. Do you want to do it? I was like, heck yeah, I want to do it. And then, of course, again, complete naive courage. I went to them like, well, how about these 12 issues?
Oh man.
Without even blinking. I was like, this is the 12 issue story I want to tell. It's about Jane, and this is it. This is what it looks like. And they're like, well, put it together for us. It's like, sure.
Okay.
And they did it. Ultimately became 11 issues, so they did an oversized final issue for my story arc. But they gave me
Really
I went
well done.
yeah. So I went from one issue, one shot to 11 issues on Firefly, which is freaking amazing.
Yeah,
So I'm
yeah.
like, we all have that anxiety. It's like, okay, well, that's cool. But I still, like, what do we do from here? So the next thing that I think came out was Rain.
How'd that come
So
together?
by the absolute stroke of luck and miracle. So, well, I got to be friends with Chris Ryle, who was formerly at IDW when I was there, and he knew my work. And I had expressed to him one day that I loved this Joe Hill story. And he's good friends with Joe because he's the editor on Lock and Key. And I
Oh.
was like, do you think in any scenario that Joe might do an adaptation, might let some Joe Schmo off the street do an adaptation of his story? And Chris says, well, he really doesn't like when other people adapt his work, but let's give it a shot. So we talked to Joe. I put together, again, this is free work. I just put together a whole breakdown of 5 issues that how I saw it, because it was so clear to me how this story would work in comics. Put together 5 issues and a 5-issue outline. Changing things. I'm like, I just went in. I'm like, Joe, I love you, but
Oh,
I'm
that's
changing this
risky.
now. Totally risky, totally risky. But again, I'm just doing what my gut tells me is
Hey,
what
that's the
what I
key
need to
that we're
do.
learning from you. You just do what's in your soul. And it
Yeah,
works.
I've learned, and my gut is 100% correct all the time. Whether
Yeah.
it's vibes about people or success or stories or whatever, it's just follow your gut all the time. That's all I ever do. So my gut was this is how it works best in comics. And if Joe doesn't like that, then frankly I don't know if I want to do the story because you know I have the perspective on it, like this point of view about how the story should unfold. And there's I don't want to sound like a jerk when I say that because it's like it's not my way or the highway. But if he comes back and he's like, no, we need a straight adaptation, you can't change anything. I don't know if the story from prose works in comics if you don't change stuff. So that's sort of where I was. And Chris sent it over. He sent over, I think he sent Kanto over to Joe. He was like, you really dig this comic. Booher's okay to work with. Here's what he's thinking. And Joe's like, sure, let's give it a shot.
Wow.
So then Chris, and a lot of kudos to Chris Ryle, because he's the one who's shepherding this. And then he's the one who got Zoe involved, Zoe Thorogood. And this was in 2020. So we were working, I think Rain started coming out in June of 22. So we were all working through end of 2020, all of 2021 to get these issues finished. Um, and I don't know if you've read Lonely at the Center of the Earth that Zoe did.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, so she sort of talks about her, being involved in Rain and sort of where she was in her own life and sort of what she wanted to do. And so we're going through this and we got it to the finish line and it came out in January. And then suddenly Lonely at the Center of the Earth came out and Zoe became like the toast
Yeah, the
of
ultra
comics. And
celebrity kind of.
yeah, she, and she's it's all well deserved because she's so talented. She's so
Oh, for
talented.
sure. Yeah.
Um, so the opportunity to work with her adapting a Joe Hill story, it was amazing and it was full circle for me because as I said at the beginning, what got me into comics was Lock and Key. And then to work so closely with Joe to adapt one of his stories that I absolutely love to comics was kind of like, well, I guess if nothing else happens from here, uh, I,
You've peaked. Like, I'm happy there.
I've
If nothing
peaked.
else happens, it can end
But
on top.
we
No, I
say
know
that, but
exactly what
then
you're
I'm
saying.
also
That's
like,
how every project I do, that's how I want to feel. So that I'm just like, if it doesn't go anywhere, at least I work with this amazing artist. We had a great time doing this. But yeah, with you,
yeah.
it just seems like you are truly like each time you're actually making like full solid steps up in your career.
So, and
We're
it's all
getting
the stuff
close
that,
on time,
yeah,
and I feel bad, and I hate like normally I have plenty of time, but today's one of those days where it's like we're almost at
panicking.
half an hour mark. So, uh, I will now. I'm gonna have to find time for us to have another discussion to go
Part
further
two.
because I got all kinds of stuff to go into. But for now, I guess we'll conclude with where you're at today with your current book that you're crowdfunding through Zoop. And if you could just explain like what was your decision process in that book and why you decided to go that route with this book and not kind of the what most of the rest of us do. I feel like is either Kickstarter or Indiegogo, and I'm just
Sure.
wondering like what is like the key aspects to where Zoop is helpful in that, because I'm not sure like with Kickstarter we can like kind of reach new audiences, I guess, so to speak, and with Zoop there must be something else that's a benefit on your end. So I'm just curious, what's the story on that, and that's that.
Sure, yeah. So it's a one-shot horror series that Drew Zucker, the co-creator on Kanto, and the colorist Vittorio Stone and the letterer Andrew Design, all from Kanto, came together to do this like much more grown-up horror story. It's kind of like an EC Comics sort of throwback, mid-century horror, like Tales from the Crypt, creep show type thing. And it's a one-shot story. And I never really considered doing crowdfunding for anything, except this was a cool book that we thought crowdfunding could be a fun way to start its life cycle because we think this is just the first step in the life cycle of this story as we go along. And the reason why we picked Zoop was because Kickstarter is a platform, and Kickstarter, as far as everything that I've heard, it's sort of like you are the master of your own, you're the captain of your own ship. And it all falls on you, all the work, everything falls on you, and they will provide that platform. Zoop, everything, Drew and I are busy. So everything that, from setting up the campaign to printing to fulfillment, all of that is taken care of by Zoop. And we know the guys who run Zoop personally. So they really helped us through the process and gave us the bandwidth to be able to do a crowdfunded book when Drew and I, just based on our other projects and other workload that were going on, we couldn't have carried that burden of doing this on Kickstarter. Do I think maybe we would have gotten a wider audience on Kickstarter? Certainly, but even doubling what we've done on Zoop may not have been worth the trade-off of how much time and energy we would have had to spend on setting it up, promoting it, and then fulfillment on Kickstarter. So the great thing about this book, it's a one shot. It was already finished. It's completely done. It's colored. It's lettered. All the art's finished. It's been built out. It's designed. And so Zoop is a pre-order platform now for the next 9 days. It's at the time of this recording. to pre-order the ZOOP variant. So there's a cover limited to 500. There is a foil variant that's limited to 150, and there's a black and white full issue that's limited to 100. And those are ZOOP variants. And once the campaign's over, they go into the vault. That's it. So the next step in the feeding's life, hopefully, will be a mass market comics market release with a new cover. So it'll be a different variant for this. So the idea is folks will get on the campaign now to support it early and get these early copies. So when it's a $billion Hollywood horror franchise, you
Guaranteed.
got those early copies.
Heck yeah. Well, I'm gonna try to post this tomorrow. I'm gonna put, if you want to send me or have your baller assistant status, send me all the links for your stuff. I will put these in the show notes. Man, it's been great talking to you. I really regret not having more time, but we're gonna do this again.
We'll do
and
part
we'll
two
finish out
because we
your
only
next...
got to 2021.
I know, that's what I'm saying. Next time we got to finish like up till there's still we haven't covered Dungeons and Dragons. We haven't covered.
By the next time we talk, there's going to be more things that
We'll do
I
it
will be able to
whenever
talk to you about.
when whatever's after the feeding, whenever you want your next hype momentum, we'll go deeper into your career and anything else that you do for marketing and stuff, because that's what I try to cover. Like is, people that have books, there's not many people like me that have books in the direct market like you, that give sort of advice about marketing or kind of promoting or getting your book out there in ways other than just spamming on social media, and so that's why I try to just like give people a little bit of insight. Well, hey, we all may do it.
No, I know, I do it too, and it's just like just take those little Instagram squares and you're just throwing them off into the void.
Hey, some of them stick. My family loves my books.
Same.
All right. Yeah, so I'll get all that in the show notes, and we'll post the feeding. Yeah, once again, everybody, David Booher, legend in the space, rising, and long career ahead, I'm sure. But yeah, from my
Fingers
perspective,
crossed,
I was like, you're a perfect example of someone that's just like, like myself. I read comics as I was younger, but there was a long break, and I didn't really get back into it until I was, late 20s, and then I dove like pretty deep into it once I got back into it, and now here we are, writing it, sort of,
making it.
Yeah, yep. Sort of making it one day at a time. All right, once again, thanks a lot. See ya.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.